Babalofan ibiyahi Pamatinasi bidamu Baba matamu para modna Tanatalay kaite.
Good day, everybody. My name is Monaeka Flores, and I am a member of Independent Guåhan and Prutehi Litekyan, and I'm honored to be here tonight, or today, with all of you for this very special podcast episode of Fanachu. We have with us members of Marianas for Palestine who have been engaged with many different actions, calls to action, and responses in our community. And we're very honored to have with us, the voice of Ahmed Salam Castro Younis from the Northern Marianas, from Saipan, as well as Choi and Zulfiia Eshanova, two young organizers from Marianas for Palestine. And, thank you all so much for being here. We've been involved with a lot of different things, and we want to, of course, ground our conversation with our Chamoru Palestinian Chetlu, Salam. And I just to make a quick introduction, Salam and his Palestinian Chamoru family, they're beloved members of the Saipan community, and they have continuously worked for many decades now to enrich the lives of islanders throughout the Marianas archipelago. And Salam is here today to share his personal story and connect our communities and help cultivate solidarity from the Marianas to Palestine. Salam Younis comes from a family that's been making these connections and cultivating this solidarity now for many years. Chetlu, Salam, we're honored to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Salam alaikum. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Fanachu, for having us on. We're very honored to be here. Good evening to everybody, or good afternoon. And it's still very hard every day. I have family out there in Palestine. You could bring up the map to show you exactly where we're from. And the last time I heard from them, they said the situation was very tense. They can't do anything, basically. So our area is around, like, kind of in the middle of Haifa, Nazareth, and Jenin, around that area. It's beautiful. It's lovely. You can. I was there last year, thankfully, before everything happened. We're supposed to go back again this year for the olive harvest. It's usually around October. It's a very great time to be there, and it's so sad that this is going on, in October. What happened in October? It's usually a very happy time to be there. And so last time I spoke to the family, they said situation's very tense. They want us to keep going on, keep the movement going, keep the momentum going. And and we're here for them. I'm so happy to see a lot of people from the Marianas stand up for Palestine, show solidarity, but we need more. There's still a lot of work to be done. What we are up against, as most people can see, because now we see that there's mainstream media who are perpetrating the one-sidedness and and then there's all these independent journalists who are putting out raw truth, stuff that is not going through a board to decide what information we get. They're just putting out what they see right in front of their eyes, unfiltered. And so we're seeing two very different types of information that we're getting, and we're able to make our own decisions. And if you can see the response from the world, you know, it's you can see who's right, or the majority, because it's where the people who are standing up are connected through that feeling that down to the very core of your bones, that humans need each other. And that's really an unbreakable bond, you know. No ideology, no movement can never break that, because every human is connected that way. Some people do lose that connection, and it's very sad. But at the same time, to see all the huge amounts of crowds that are still protesting, still standing up, showing up, showing solidarity. I said it before, I have never seen that in my lifetime, and it's really unbelievable. And I just want to keep doing whatever I can to keep it going and get as much people back on that human side to care for human life again. Because, if we look back to how we live, even as ancient Chamorros, so connected to the land, so connected to each other, the, you know, I just can't understand how uh, someone from the Marianas could be associated or even connected with the Zionist movement. I don't see. It just bewilders me. The struggle for freedom, liberation, what the Palestinians are going through, battling an occupation, battling militarization, that's what I see every day here in the Marianas. That's what we're connected to, you know. I don't see how can we be connected to a movement that wants to establish a state that's only for Jews only? Where are we in that equation? In itself, that's, you know, so yeah, you know, going back to the human side and talking about how we live as ancient Chamorros, as ancient Chamorros, our Nakba, the Nakba, which is catastrophe in Arabic, Palestinian, in 1948, the first expulsion from all their villages. For us, our Nakba was, 1,000 years ago by the Spaniards when they moved all the Chamorros from all the islands and put them all in Guåhan. There was so much loss of life during that time. The ancient Chamorros fought 100-year war. Palestinians are basically 75 years deep, 80 years deep, actually. They're almost there too. The the right to resist is in both our bloods, Chamorro and Palestinian. That's how we should. That's that's a main connection right there. And there's what was done to us here, what they're doing there. There's so many parallels. I remember, if I could sorry, I don't have all my sources with me. I think the book was From Conquest to Colonization by Francis Hazel. But I remember it was the people of Tinian who fought so hard, the longest. They held out the longest. They fought, and to the point where they went to sorry, Goat Island, the island right south of Tinian. And they held up there. They held up there. That was their last defense. And the Spaniards basically had no choice, but they burnt their villages back on Tinian. They surrounded the island, Goat Island, because it's a lot smaller, and they basically starved them to surrender. That's the only way that people of Tinian gave up. There's a lot more other stories too of all these Chamorro villages that were raided. They even got Chamorros to turn on each other back then. And that's in our history, and it's basically what the Palestinians are going through right now. And what was the end result? We lost so much. We lost a lot of land, a lot of resources, and a lot of people, what they don't think is that it's still ongoing now, but what the military did during the war, they polluted the island so much. To this day, it's not even the extent of how much the islands are polluted, not just in the Marianas, all over Palau, is still undiscovered. Even just unexploded ordnance, all the chemicals left behind. On here in Saipan, one village, Tanapak, had that big PCB exposure. Luckily, they got it cleaned up, but there's a lot more other cases that have not come to light that I'm sure of. So, it's for us here in the Marianas, it's already in our history. It's still ongoing. It's just been whitewashed, been normalized, but we still have the chance to fight. By showing our solidarity with Palestine, showing that, hey, natives have the right to resist. This is our land. We get to choose what to do with it. And so, yeah, it's more meaningful now than ever.
Thank you so much, Salam, for making those connections, and especially to even the current situation of militarization in the region and really the harms that are coming with contamination. But also, we have a large deployment of troops from this area in the Middle East, and we have people from the islands for economic reasons truly joining the military, and now participating in a war that's not of our making, participating in the possibly the support of these atrocities happening in occupied Palestine. And we also included in our statement for Marianas for Palestine that we invite the veteran community and members of the military community instead to stand in solidarity with us to demand a ceasefire. And thank you for making those connections between the harms that are happening there and harms that are happening here. You're right about, gosh, even the environmental destruction that's happening in Palestine, with the destruction of the olive trees, with all of the contamination now from the bombs, the constant bombardment, the use of white phosphorus, what that's doing to the water, to the air that people are breathing, to the dust that they're wearing. So thank you so much for making those connections. Somebody was even saying that the bombs tested in Puerto Rico and Vieques that contaminated the land and made the people sick there were used to attack Palestinians. And so these connections are so far reaching, where the United States has these colonial holds and is militarizing these lands. It is connected to the violence that's taking place in Palestine. And so your family has a wonderful history, you know, as we're talking about these connections of solidarity. Your family definitely cultivated that solidarity early on. And would you like to talk about your father and your family a little bit, and you know, and please share your story with us.
So my father was born in 1936, and when he was 12 years old, that Nakba happened, the catastrophe happened, and the state of Israel was birthed, and he witnessed that his homeland, being from Palestine, turned into another state, and he was a fighter from the heart. He at 16 he was detained for 40 days for drawing the Palestinian flag, and that's when it was banned, like outright banned. And so he carried that pain with him. He always didn't want to talk about it because he didn't want us to know what he experienced. We heard from our other relatives about him being detained and stuff like that. And so that was really hard. It gives me nightmares about being detained, and I know so many Palestinians go through that. But yeah, he was a fighter. His older brother joined the Syrian army, who was at war with Israel at the time, and that was his way to fight the occupation. But when he left and joined the Syrian army, of course, he's not allowed back into Palestine. So my father, they never got to see each other again, and we never got to meet him. Um, my father really wanted to help his family out. His older sisters were the ones taking care of the household, and so so that he can go and get an education and work, and then get his education, and then he got his Israeli citizenship. Of course, if he could gotten Palestinian citizenship, that would allow him to leave. He had to get an Israeli passport. Then that allowed him to leave, which he did. Found work through his friends from. He was involved in an art academy. Found some work there in Norway and the Netherlands, and then from there, he got a job in Japan through a broadcasting company, and they sent him on a task to Guam. He didn't mention what he was going to do there, and but he ended up overstaying, and his work visa expired, and they basically had to deport him. U.S. immigration had to deport him, and the next flight was to Saipan. So he had to get on that flight. He had nothing with him but his bag of clothes, and he found himself here on Saipan. And he actually, the first Chamorros that he met basically took him in, got him a place to stay, got him food, and became his friends, and took him to parties, took him to meet other people, gave him um, really showed him good, that island hospitality. And my dad connected with that. By this time, my dad was born Muslim, but through all his travels, he wasn't really able to practice that much. So throughout the years, he wasn't practicing. And by the time he got here to Saipan, he he basically wasn't calling himself Muslim. He was Palestinian. And so he was able to you go do the to the island life, and he met my mom. He met her at a party. It was a party hosted by Air Micronesia stewardess. But yeah, and this was in 1967, 68. And my dad then got involved with the Peace Corps newspaper. And after the Peace Corps left, they sold it to my father and Mr. Sam McPeters. And then my father ended up getting it, and was the first local independent newspaper. And he started to get involved into the island politics because, he during that time the islands were still under trust territory, and he saw the potential for the islands to, really be beautiful, independent, nation. And he told me stories that there was a group of them during that time, and they actually got it to, they were campaigning for independence, independent status, not Commonwealth. Um, what was the other one? There's another option. I think territory. But he was for him and a bunch of others. He said it was a pretty big group, and they got to the point where they were actually plotting to burn the trust territory office, to bring attention to their campaign for their fight for independence. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I remember him telling me those stories, and because that's something he definitely could feel in his bones. He experienced what happened in Palestine, and he didn't want that for the Marianas. And to his very last days, he always fought for independence. He hated the fact that we relied so much on the U.S. Yeah, and so he would, when Palau got its independent status, he was really happy about that. I remember he even started a newspaper in Palau in the 90s, uh, Palau Horizon, and he spent a lot of time there too. That he was entrenched in Palau politics too, Palau politics, yeah. So yeah, he really everywhere he went, he pushed for independence. He knew how important that was. And my mom too. Funny story. She was actually in um, back then. A lot of uh, the Chamorro women from Saipan. I don't know if it was a program or what, but they were sent to a convent in Kansas City, and they got education. But so my mom was basically almost a nun. Um, back then, but it was during the fight for abortion rights, when the convent took a stand that that she wasn't with, and so she left it. So she was a fighter for women's rights too. She left the convent to stand up for women's rights. And then she became a longtime educator here in Saipan. She was, of course, the co-founder of the newspaper, the local independent newspaper too. So yeah, and we've always like basically everywhere when we had to explain ourselves, where's Palestine or where's Saipan, like time we traveled or what. And so we're used to always standing up for Palestine, showing up for it, and also showing our pride for the Marianas and our culture too. They're hand in hand. And
Thank you so much, Salam. You know, your family was so had a big role to play in the community, and one of the things you mentioned earlier was this erasure that happens in the media. And it's interesting that your parents created media, the first local independent news source for the Marianas. And now we're seeing the suppression of voices in the United States as well, you know, as in Palestine, the suppression of Palestinian voices talking about the violence that they are witnessing and experiencing every single day. Would you like to speak to any of the other images, or should we open up to questions from or from the folks here? We're so honored to have you, Salam, and you know, we're very grateful for you being here, for you sharing the story of your family in the Marianas, and you know, as well as sharing the story of your family in Palestine right now. We're part of Marianas for Palestine. All of us here in this gathering, and these two young folks here with us, Choi and Zulfiia Eshanova, are the younger organizers of the group. They've been at all of the protests. We've had 3 protests, one in front of the governor's complex, one in front of the legislature, and one in front of the Congressman Jim Moylan's office. And we also launched a successful call and email campaign to block a resolution that was quite problematic, and you know, took the position of only condemning Hamas and standing in solidarity with Israel, and not condemning the horrible crimes committed by Israel on the Palestinian people. And we've seen a lot of this messaging, and it's good that we're here together to critique it and talk about it. But and we've experienced different things at the protests, but it's good to open up now, maybe for conversation here with the young folks, you know, talking about if they have questions, of course, for you, but also talking about their experiences at the protests, and you know, what brings them to organizing for Palestine. Yeah, let's see. Let's start with who would like to go first? Guåhan, should we start with you?
Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, I guess in response to, you know, how I find myself here, you know, standing in solidarity for Palestine, as a young organizer for MFP, or Marianas for Palestine. I think for me, I just like to think of it as like, I don't know, I think just as a human being, you know, just seeing how others are not being treated as human beings. You know, how can I not stand in solidarity? You know, how can I not bear witness to these atrocities taking place when Palestinians are asking us and are begging us to bear witness and to spread awareness and to share, to post, to boycott, to protest, because they essentially cannot, right? And so it's for me, it's very important to, just as, I don't know, just very base level as a human being, just to stand in solidarity, you know, against these atrocities taking place. And, you know, on a more personal level, for me as a Korean woman, you know, my ancestors survived Japanese colonization and war. And Korea is still being heavily militarized by, you know, the US capitalist profit machine, you know, and myself being born and raised on Guam, I grew aware to also be aware of the Chamoru, an indigenous struggle against colonization and militarization. And so, as Salam said, we are all connected by our shared understanding of colonization, imperialism, militarization, and the sort of the fight, you know, for resistance and for liberation. And so for me, it's impossible to stand by in silence when all of these things are going on. And I know that, as a young person, I feel like we are often taught that we are powerless, in this world, that we have no voice, that we have no money, we have no power. So, why are you doing this? But for me, in a way, I feel like we have the least to lose. We have yet to be too ingrained in the sort of capitalist working machine as so many are. So I want to use the sort of space that I have, the voice that I have, to uplift Palestinian voices, to stand in solidarity where I can and however I can. And so, yeah, that's just it's a little bit of what's been on my mind.
Thank you so much, Jihae, and thank you for, making that connection of the military-industrial complex and the U.S. war machine to Korea as well. And the desecration of land, the contamination, the gendered violence to women and children that's taking place, and also the uprising against this increased U.S. militarization in Korea is definitely linked to what's happening here in Guåhan and the Marianas, as Salam mentioned, and also to Palestine. So thanks also for bridging that connection. And so thanks for sharing your thoughts and response to Salam. Zulfiia, can we hear from you next?
So I'd like to thank Salam for sharing his story, and it's inspiring, and it's really sad to hear everything. Why I stand in solidarity with Palestine for Palestine is because, not just because I'm Muslim, not just because it's humane, but also because it's the right thing to do. If you know this history, the real people, people who know the history, will understand, will know what is right and what is wrong. And those who don't, they would just believe the media, what they're telling them, and blindly believe what they show them, what they show to the people. And it's just so disappointing to see that people would not do their own research, and it's really hurting to see people who exist like that, and they only focus on the recent season that started on October 7, which is not, it didn't start on October 7. And I feel attacked because as soon as Muslims do something, the media will portray them as bad people. As soon as they resist, they will show them as attackers, as war starters. And it's just not true. And I want to change people's opinions, people's perspectives on us. Yes.
Thank you for that. I also wanted to add, recently with my family, they also asked me to make sure that they can't be identified through what I do. So that's why I don't show pictures of my relatives there in Palestine. I don't post about them because even people there are getting detained just for liking certain social media posts. So that when I last got to hear from my family, they said make sure that there's no connection, that they can't be connected, that can't be discovered or found. Or yeah, it's so crazy.
Yeah, we're witnessing the silencing of voices for sure. There was an attack on several communication towers. There's been no internet, no power, no fuel being allowed into Gaza. There's been increased violence in the West Bank. just in the last couple of days, we saw UN schools that were sheltering thousands of people being attacked and bombed, and then the forced evacuation of Al-Shifa Hospital, the violent recapture, and all without providing any evidence of
They
military.
also attacked that hospital in Jenin. That's close to where, where we're at. And then they have this thing where they're creating these checkpoints, more checkpoints around the West Bank to delay movement. So traffic is insanely, what's what they're telling me. They wait for hours on the road now just to get anywhere. So it's nuts.
And this sort of control of movement is something that's been happening for the last 75 years. This is the reality of an apartheid state. And like Zulfiia was mentioning, people are not aware of the history, starting with the Balfour Declaration, right? Going to the Nakba, like you talked about earlier, the first catastrophe, mass genocide, and forced displacement of Palestinian people. And now we're looking at the second Nakba, and even Israeli government officials are admitting and using this language. It's blatant. They are even saying that this is a genocide, and it's blatant. And so why leaders aren't calling for a ceasefire is absolutely senseless. We feel that the elected officials who continue to remain silent are complicit to these war crimes, and we have made a statement which makes these particular demands that our leaders call for an immediate ceasefire, that we also call for an immediate ceasefire, that we call for the end to violence in the West Bank and other parts of occupied Palestine, that we call for the end of siege, that immediate aid be allowed in, and that we stop funding and arms, that the United States stop sending billions and billions of dollars to arm this genocide and this destruction that's happening in occupied Palestine. And you're absolutely right as well. You all sort of spoke to the mass campaign of Islamophobia that's happened over, now many decades since September 11th, the post 9/11 massive Islamophobia campaigns. We're seeing this now, which continues to have criminalized Muslims in the Arab world, but also the criminalizations connected to criminalization of indigenous people, of brown and black people everywhere. But we've seen this happening, building up this false justification of these horrors. But of course, like Zulfiia and Jihei said, once you see the truth, you can't unsee the truth. And there are many voices out there speaking truth to power, yours included, Salam, and we're so grateful for you. And we stand with you, we stand with your family, and we are committed, to continuing to make these connections of occupied lands, of colonized people, so that we can continue to build solidarity, but truly find a solution for our shared liberation. Long live a free Palestine. We have to nurture the resistance as long as we can, and it's just, we're stronger together. And it's been an honor to be in this work with all of you. Salam, you have a couple other images. Did you want to speak to those, or should we? Did you want to speak to any of those images? No. Okay. All right. Well, with that, I guess I'll speak to our statement that was released by Marianas for Palestine, signed by over 20 community organizations, and it's something we're quite proud of. And aside from the actions here in Guåhan and the campaign, we have also had a small delegation that Micronesia Climate Change Alliance had, about 3 folks going to participate in the massive march in DC. Over hundreds of thousands of people, actually millions of people now all over the world, protesting the constant bombardment, calling for a ceasefire, calling for the end to the occupation of the settler colonial state of Israel. And I just want to read those demands are also included in our statement. And something in our statement that really I just wanted to share is that we say, as colonized people of the Marianas, we recognize that the root cause of the war in Palestine is one of colonization, racism, and Zionist imperialism that demands power and control over vital natural resources and vulnerable human lives. Furthermore, we recognize that the extractive and violent war industry also profits from occupying lands and oppressing Native peoples in the Pacific. We know that the ongoing hypermilitarization of the Marianas Islands has grown out of a similar history of land dispossession, power grabs, and denial of sovereign indigenous rights. And that's a part of the statement that I'm particularly proud of. And of course, a group of young college students had attempted to deliver the statement to Congressman Jim Moylan's office. We had a protest at the end of the building that was facing the main street, and the entrance to Jim Moylan's office is on the other side. And during the protest, a small group of students, about 4 students, had attempted to deliver the statement and found that the building was locked. They made a few calls to the congressman's office and waited several minutes. And, we're told that staff were intimidated, so that they needed to wait, or that they didn't feel like they could come down. So some of the group left. Anyway, we have a news coverage of this story now, and we'd like to share it and respond to it here.
As the death toll continues to climb, local advocates standing in solidarity with Palestine are demanding an immediate ceasefire, humanitarian aid to Palestine, an end to the siege, and end arms funding to Israel. But a recent peaceful protest met with locked doors. Marianas for Palestine collective members trying to deliver a statement to Congressman Jim Moylan's office last Tuesday, only to find the building was locked down. After 15 minutes of waiting and multiple calls to the office, a staffer came down to receive the statement.
You see that the congressman gets this is the statement. It has an extensive list of organizations from Guåhan and the rest of the region, and also it has various news articles that are attributed to the statement, as well as the list of names, over 7,000 so far dead, and actually it's over 11,000, so this list is up to date. And so we need the congressman to speak out against this war and call for a ceasefire immediately.
Moylan's chief of staff, Bobby Shringi, says the building's landlord decided to lock the doors to protect its occupants and to avoid confrontation.
It actually was a decision by the landlord of the building, but it was after a discussion that we had with her to make sure that everybody is safe. And I'll be honest, while I'm not going to put apples and orange comparison to the group that is protesting here to what we've first had experience there in DC, but there are numerous protests that have been ongoing for the last several weeks with groups who have supported a very similar position of this group last week. And unfortunately, they have not been very friendly.
But Prutehi Litekyan's Monaeka Flores telling KUAM the people they locked out were a small group of 4 young students who remained calm and respectful.
Instead of coming to meet with these young voters and with our community, the staff hid in their office. What more is that Moylan failed to report to local media that he joined the pro-Israel march in DC just hours away from our protest. The march he attended was headlined by white supremacists and anti-Semite televangelist John Hagee. Attendees made incessant calls for Israel to keep bombing Gaza and destroy Palestinian lives, to, quote, finish them off, unquote. Just reading the racist signs of the protesters at that march, it is clear that Jim Moylan attended a march that was obviously a celebration of war and war crimes.
The delegate, meanwhile, telling KUAM he stands with U.S. ally Israel.
We stand with the nation. We support Israel. Mm-hmm. Now, the best way to do that, of course, is diplomacy. President Biden had his conversation as well going on with that. So, moving forward, a lot of better things are done than the killing of some. There's information that was provided for congressional members and videos that we've seen that is it's terrible. Okay? So, to avoid all that, that's very important. And our peaceful way is to stand with the ones that represent the peace of democracy, and that's where we stand as well.
Matsuki Hirayama, KUAM News.
Okay, watching that video is quite disturbing. A lot of things I think we need to respond to. First of all, immediately, of course, is the standing with the nation. This just really emphasizes and highlights a colonial relationship that a lot of us don't agree with. This position, a lot of us, so the people of Guam, don't necessarily take this position that since this is an ally of the United States, that this is an ally of Guåhan and the people of Guåhan. That in fact that this aligns with our values. He does not seem well informed. He does not seem aware of the history. And then to speak of things like diplomacy and avoid these horrors, he could do that simply by demanding a ceasefire, and why he refuses to do that is quite senseless to me. And then also to allude to democracy, this myth of democracy. As we spoke about before, the apartheid reality in occupied Palestine is the antithesis, the total opposite of a democracy. They are not represented in elections. They are prohibited in movement. We can really describe how democracy has been withheld and how this is just a total farce, and that it also really goes also against the claim that the United States is a defender of democracy and peace and justice. Not only are they funding this war and backing this war, the United States government is enabling this genocide, is enabling this destruction, which is not democracy, absolutely not democracy. Salam, maybe start with you. Would you like to comment first on this news report, or should we maybe start? Yes, please, Salam. Can we start with you?
Oh yeah, I definitely want to comment on it. First off, the chief of staff, his narrative is just right off the bat. He's like, "Oh, they're dangerous. Let's lock ourselves in the office." Like, wow, really? Same narrative that's going on in mainstream media. They took that right off their playbook. Second of all, I know that the video that President Moylan, the video that he talked about them watching is the one they showed of the Hamas attacks, which is very one-sided. You could go onto any social media now and see what's the worst atrocities going on that is committed by the state that he stands with, that so-called represents peace and democracy. Really, even just the numbers themselves tell a whole different story. So yeah, what a complete farce, what a lame excuse. And they're just going with exactly what the propaganda machine has been giving us. And he even stutters when he was gonna say the killing of innocent civilians, but he stopped short because he knows who's doing more killing of the innocent civilians. He stopped himself there, and because he knows. And it's just a shame. It's really shameful.
Absolutely shameful. Thank you so much, Salam. Zulfiia, maybe if we can hear from you next, because you were there waiting with us, right, to deliver the statement. Can you share some of your thoughts watching this news clip now?
When the landlord said that they locked the doors for safety, and I think that it's so ridiculous, because safety from what? 4 young women just to talk, just to bring a statement, just to bring a document, to beg for us to request to demand a ceasefire. I think it's so not me. I mean, not I don't even know how to describe it. It's just so not what's professional. And when I was standing there at that time, I thought that we were gonna come inside, because to bring in the statement and have the a civil conversation, right? And but no, we just stood outside and waited for them for like 15-20 minutes, and someone came outside and we handed it, and they did, I don't think they even made eye contact with us because they were so afraid of us to roam in and then throw everything all over the place, which we definitely did not do. We just wanted to have like a conversation and give the document over there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was very frustrating and yeah, quite disappointing. We stood outside. The young folks made a couple of phone calls and it took a while for them to crack open the door to take the document. Jihei, what are your thoughts on the video, the news story from KOAM?
You know, the one part that really stuck out to me was when Moylan was like, he wants to stand with the side that promotes peace. And I was like, what? I was just baffled. Like there's really only one side that's bombing children right now. That's bombing hospitals, bombing refugee camps, schools, bakeries. And yet he says he wants to stand with the side that promotes peace, whatever that means. You know, it's a true shame, a real stain on, on our humanity when you really need hundreds and hundreds of people in protest to tell you that bombing children, that bombing hospitals is wrong, that genocide is bad. Like that's such a baseline moral like conclusion to make. But it's just really disappointing, just to see how the people in power fail to see that simple conclusion.
Yeah, it is, and it's been absolutely devastating. They, they didn't include the part where, we had mentioned that demanding a ceasefire is not radical, it's human. And we're looking at 44 days now of continuous bombardment without a ceasefire. The United States has committed billions of dollars to carry out these atrocities instead of providing funds to secure housing, healthcare, and food. And now we are over 13,000 Palestinians murdered, over 5,000 of them children, and 200 medical professionals, 50 journalists also murdered. And there are still hundreds of thousands injured and displaced Palestinians, many still under the rubble and on the brink of starvation. And Israel has withheld water, fuel, food, electricity, and as we mentioned, has bombed many shelters, schools, hospitals, communication towers in the last couple of days. And this is not a distant conflict. This is connected to the hypermilitarization of our region and our ongoing colonization. And the silence of Guam's elected officials makes them complicit to these war crimes. And we need them to send their prayers for the Palestinian people. We need to see resolutions calling for a ceasefire. And we won't forget this on Election Day. And, you all talked about like Moylan choosing to not engage with the community. Moylan also chose not to talk about where he decided to engage, which was in this this pro-Israel march in Washington, D.C., and the media doesn't cover how violent that march also was. So there's this, misrepresentation, like we're speaking to in the media. That march actually had a number of really violent and racist incidents, and including, these really problematic main speakers. So we have to question, where Jim Moylan is getting his information from. And we hope he's read that statement. He didn't seem to mention it at all to the media. If he even took a look at that statement, which, included the list published with thousands and thousands of names. Now that list is outdated. It's doubled since that first list was published. And we just have to keep moving. Like Salam was saying, we have to keep going and keep pushing this message, to keep demanding, keep calling for a ceasefire, and even go beyond a ceasefire to dream what should happen beyond a ceasefire. And, you know, of course, that is a free Palestine. And we have to connect, you know, the struggles that are happening in Palestine are really bringing to light all these other struggles of colonization, militarization, and genocide, from Congo to Sudan to Haiti to West Papua, where, you know, it's either military or these horrible extractive exploitive industries like cobalt and other minerals for smartphones and laptops. And, you know, these things, though, or fuel or gas reserves, like in Gaza, right? These things fuel each other. The military industrial complex as well is connected to these extractive and exploitive industries. And we can look and know for a fact that the war industry has already made a lot of money from these horrible attacks. The war, you know, the war arms, the arms making industries, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, several others, and so it's not a representation of democracy and peace. It's an autocracy or an oligarchy or something else. It's not a democracy. So I just wanted to invite, you know, Salam to make any closing thoughts. We've had these actions here at home in Guåhan, and we want to do more throughout Marianas. And we've had folks go to the States. You know, what would you like to see us do? You know, what are the things that we can do as a community to continue to respond? And please, you know, share your thoughts. And of course, we are with you in solidarity, and we won't stop making these connections and having these important conversations in the community. Sanamasi.
Yeah, you guys really, I mean, we want to keep it going and do grassroots action here too, here in Saipan, this year in Mai. I hope that this could actually get to the officials and that they can make the move on their own, but I highly doubt that. So we're gonna go out, make some noise, maybe block a few roads. But yeah, we're gonna do it. You know, if we can get it started here, just in the small islands, it's like the LA Times, the first large newspaper or national newspaper to call for a ceasefire today. That's big. So what if we could be like the first territorial government to call for a ceasefire? You know, that could be done. And, you know, so I'd really like to get something started here. Hopefully, Representative Kilili hears this podcast and he can take the first step. If not, we're gonna show up to his office. You know, we're gonna go make some noise. And I just still can't believe that it's still ongoing. And yeah, we really need this. People of Gaza need us. So that's what we're gonna do. Yeah. Any support, you know, send it this way. We'll keep you guys informed. Viva Palestine, Viva Marianas.
Viva Palestine, Viva Marianas. You know, we stand in solidarity with all indigenous occupied peoples and lands, and we, you know, are here committed to our shared liberation. And I just want to really thank again, you know, Salam Younis, for being with us. It's an honor to hear your family story and your own experiences, and also Choi and Zulfiia, Eshanova. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your perspective as young organizers, and especially, you know, with the recent disappointing news with Congressman Moylan. And as Salam was saying, we're not done. We will keep making noise. We will keep demanding that leaders rise up for ceasefire and for a free Palestine. And we want to thank also Senor Miguel Vavakwa for his support, and Independent Guåhan for you know, having this Fanachu podcast in solidarity. Please continue to follow Marianas for Palestine for calls to action. There are several resources on our Instagram page, and we will continue to build solidarity among the Marianas Islands and figure out ways to support each other and work together. And Salam, we will be there with you in Saipan for those actions. We'll find a way. So Sinamas, everybody, and Viva Palestine. Long live a free Palestine.